Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Paint with Sean. So, today we are continuing on our mountain scene. We have gone through the background with the sky, the clouds, the mountains, the mountain lake in the top, some distant trees. We've now got sort of a distant type path going on. We've got our waterfall with a little river. And today we are going to work on some, as Bob Ross would call them, almighty rocks. So we are going to make some big structures today. This area in here is going to be sort of a cliff face with a little bit of a shelf at the bottom. And then over here is going to be a giant rock area that comes down into some land. And then we'll finish off the painting in the next couple here. So we are going to focus on rocks today. We're also going to add some sort of detail rocks. We're going to put one right here in the middle of our waterfall, so we've made a little space for it to live where the waterfall is splashing up on it, and just sort of dotted a little bit here and there on our path to kind of break it up a little bit and make it look a little more natural. We may have a couple down here at the bottom. So we're going to make a couple different kind of rock structures today. I've got just a couple colors on my board, some black, brown, and white primarily. I have a couple other colors, but not that I'm going to use. So we are going to focus on the big stuff first. All right, so we want to put the main structures in the background and that kind of stuff. And we're going to use our knife today. And this is going to have a similar effect to the mountains, where once we put it in, we can come over the top with some highlight and low light colors that will actually make it pop. We're going to have some highlights and some things that really show some dimension. Okay, but we still want to keep this fairly dark because our light source is over here, and oh boy, so we'll wipe that off. But we are going to have a good amount of shadow where this cliff face is on the opposite side. Okay, so painting is messy. So this is why I love to record these live, because this is really how it works. It's not all perfect in a studio and anything edited out. We're really doing this live here together. So we are going to make a fairly dark brown color. Now we've already got a sort of base here, and I just want to fill this in the rest of the way with a base now that we know where our area is. So we can bring it pretty well up to the line of the water. And that'll give us a background structure to sort of play with here. So we're going to mimic sort of that color. So we're just going to pull out a good bit of black. And again, I never really know where the camera is. And then just, a good amount of brown. And we're going to mix that all together. And we want this to be a little bit darker. So we're going to add some more black. Okay, and our color's not quite as dark as that. So let's go a little darker. And that's kind of how it works, guys. There isn't a recipe for this that says, one scrape of brown and 2 scrapes of black or whatever. So you kind of play with it till you get the right color that you feel that you're looking for. So okay, and I want this to be fairly thin so it will dry quickly, so that it won't muddle the next colors that we're putting on there too much. Okay, so I'm just going to wipe off my palette knife. These things are pretty versatile. You can do a lot of stuff with them. Okay, let's get some more paper towels here. These paper towels are fantastic. Okay, so now that we've got our background color on here, we want to come in with some pieces that will show some dimension again. So this is that change between light and dark. So anything that is going to be showing more light obviously needs to be a little bit lighter. So this little shelf up here, and I call this a shelf because I want this to appear to be sort of flat up here with this, but kind of off to the side. Okay, so I'm just going to put some indication rocks at the end to show some depth, where there will be a space that is kind of flat. And then we'll have this drop down, okay? So I'm going to put just a little bit of a lighter brown color up on the top, okay? All right, and pull out some of my brown. And again, the angles are very important, guys. So we want to sort of show this to be over here. Okay, so maybe that's not really part of the path. And then when it comes down, we'll be able to show this in a little bit more dimension by muddling the colors. Okay, so I am going to grab a little bit of white because I want to show some difference. Now it's not going to be pure white. Okay, so again, we want this to be sort of a muddy color. Okay, so it's kind of marbled in there, but it's quite a bit lighter than this color up on the top. Okay, so wherever we want that face to show, that's going to be the edge. Now again, I'm using a pretty big surface so we can cover some big area. Okay, but a real light touch, and we're just going to sort of pull down a little bit. Okay, and these little breaks is what we're looking for. All right, and it doesn't hold a lot of paint, so you may have to come back to your board, scrape across, get a little bit more. Okay, and then we're just gonna pull down and let it break. Okay, so real light touch, and you almost have to hold it flat. Okay, so we're just gonna create a little bit of a rock structure for ourselves. And where these paint differences are, these color differences, that's where it creates a lot of that variation and depth look. Okay, so I'm going to pull some more paint in here, a little bit of my brown, a little bit of my white, sort of muddle these together a little bit. Okay, so real unmixed paint, guys. We don't want too much going on. Okay, maybe one right here. And sometimes you will have these lighter points. Okay, so let them happen. We just want to let things sort of go onto our canvas. And sometimes it'll create a little shelf for you. Okay, and we can always come back over this if it doesn't break the way that you want it to. You can always come back over it with a darker color or another round of paint. Okay, so just a real light touch. It's going to give us a little bit of a rock look. Okay, so very similar to how we did our mountains. Okay, and sometimes this knife creates a little shelf. Okay, so if you push on it and you pull down evenly, you can create little shelves. So you can have various heights and levels going on within your rocks, especially on this cliff that we're making right now. This is not a rock. This is a combination of rocks. Okay, so maybe there's another one right there. So you see that little light part? That makes such a difference. Okay, another little shelf right there, and we can put one down here and play with this. Okay, so this is your little world. You can decide. And if you've never painted before, boy, painting is amazing in what it shows you that you can do. Okay, sometimes we just don't believe in ourselves purely on lack of experience. Like, oh, I don't think I could do that. It's not that you've proven to yourself that you can't do it. You've just decided you probably can't because you never have tried. Okay, so we're just going to try. We're going to throw it out here, see what happens. Okay, so that little bit of a darker color that comes into the light is what shows a different plane. Okay, and that one's a little bit dark, but we're going to come over it with some other stuff. So you see how these little breaks in the paint, guys? That's what we're really looking for here. Okay, so this is mostly brown. I'm going to throw a little bit of black in there. Okay, we're going to come over this and just put in some colors and break it up a little bit. Okay, and you guys can play with this as much as you want. And if there's ever any pieces you don't like, again, you just go over it with something else. It's pretty easy to do. Alright, so we're just going to play a little bit, make ourselves this nice little cliff face going on here. And again, the lighter the pressure, the more it will break. And if you get thicker paint sometimes, is a little more expensive, but it allows for this breakage to happen a little more randomly. Okay. So we've got a few things going on in our little rock structures here. I don't want these to look too even. Okay, so I'm just going to use a little bit of the corner to kind of pull some of this color out. Break it a little bit more. There we go. Get these to sort of relax a little. So we don't want this to look like a real organic, or we want it to look organic. We don't want it to look too perfect. Okay, so where those lights and darks are specific like that. Okay, and again, we want this sort of downward stroke to happen to indicate that things are going in a downward level. Gravity is a real thing in nature, obviously. And so we want to make sure that we're sort of representing nature as we come in here. So, all right, and this drastic drop right here. That's what we're wanting to represent. Okay, so I don't have it too light in here. I am going to grab some white and add a few spots of pop. Okay. Because the real difference makers is when you get that light and dark, and we're starting to cover things up pretty good. So I just want to get a little bit in here. Okay, so real light touches just here and there. A little bit on there, and these little differences of light. Okay, I'm barely trying to touch this. There we go. Okay, just these little bits. That's what really shows the depth, is when it goes from an extreme light to an extreme dark. Okay, so if we touch up here, we're showing this cliff falling down. Okay, and again, I don't want this to be too perfect, so I'm just gonna scrape it down a little bit and put some lines and things, and again, we can make this go however we want with a lot of depth and things like that. So again, a dark top shelf is going to show a flat area. So if I pull out some of my brown and my black here, and I just make sort of a darker color, if we come in right here, okay, and we put this little bit in here, we can immediately make this look like a little ledge. Okay, so maybe that thing just kind of fades off and it comes up right there. Okay, so then it drops off right here into that little bit of lighter color. All right, and I don't want this to be exactly perfect brown color, so we'll just kind of muddle it and spread that out a little bit. Okay, so the darker that color is, though, the more shadowed it will look. Okay, so we just want to put this on a little bit and sort of walk away. Okay, I just want to pull this edge down, give it a little bit of a shelf. Okay, so we can put another little bit of a brown edge over here. Looks like I don't have enough paint, so I'll just get some more paint, put a little bit of a shelf coming back on this one, get a little more. Okay, so again, just these little areas show those difference in depth. Okay, so it kind of looks like it's going back in. trim down a little bit. Okay, so again, the more random this is, the better. So if you've got a perfectly level edge, it doesn't always look too random. Sometimes you want that to have a little difference in color. That's what really shows shadow and light. Okay, so maybe right here we want this to just be a little bit darker, so pull some color through and show some difference, whatever you want to do. Okay, so we've got a little bit going on here. And again, I really am in no hurry most of the time, so if you guys are hanging out with me, I really appreciate this. I like to come back sometimes and just add little pieces, okay? Because these little details are what takes it from looking like a flat surface to something that really has some life to it. Okay, so it's not the Bob Ross style of one stroke walk away kind of thing most of the time. I like to come back in and put a little bit of extra time to them, because again, these are things that I'm gonna have and look at for years to come, and so are other people. So I really want to put some effort into making these really pop and look like they're semi-realistic. Okay, now it doesn't have to be all straight down, right? Some of it can curve and bump, and if we want to just change the direction of something, you can go a little laterally sometimes. And again, that's what some of these shelf looks are, right? Oh, I'm just gonna sit here and play with this forever if I don't move forward. So let's throw a few more splots of white in here just to kind of give it some highlights in different areas. Okay, I really like those white little pops. But again, if you stroke it more than once, it's probably going to mix with the color underneath. Okay, so it's one of those things where you got to kind of touch it and let it go. Put a little bit there, show that little edge. And if we turn the knife a little bit, it'll look like the edge turns. Okay, a little bit on there. That's okay, we can cover that back up. Alright, so we got a little bit of dimension going on. We've got some things happening in our little world here. Okay, so rocks are one of those things that are just very organic and free, alright? Now again, I spent a lot of time on this little piece. You can spend a lot less, however you want to do it is totally up to you. Okay, and I do want to put a little bit of breakup at the top up here so it doesn't just look like one solid color. Okay, so I'm going to mix this up a little bit with some of my lighter color. And just barely touch. Just want to put a little bit in here so it doesn't quite look so boring. And then we're going to throw some rocks on it, so that's not too much to worry about. I don't really want these super straight lines, so we can just blend this out a little bit. That's okay. So just a little bit, because we're going to come over it again, like I said. So I've got my filbert brush out here. I think that's what they're called. So sort of a round brush. The end is kind of roundish. Okay. So I like having these little drop-offs. Makes it look a little less perfect. Sorry. Sometimes you just see stuff and you want to go back after it, okay? So it really shows how that drops off. I'm going to put some of those on some of the other ones too, because I really like that. I like that effect. So we can include a little piece here and there that's just kind of doing its thing. Okay, cool. Hate playing too long. So we're going to make some little rocks, all right? So we're going to use the filbert brush, and these rocks are going to be sort of a grayish brown. Again, we don't want them to be the same color so they blend in. We want them to kind of stand out. So it's going to be a little bit more of the mountainish type color. So I'm going to get some black and just kind of pull it over here to the side so we can make a fairly dark color. And I'm going to put a little brown in it just to sort of dampen it, I guess. Soften it, I guess is a better word. So it's not a pure black. All right. So we've got our dark color here. Now, there's a couple different ways you can do rocks. In the background, you want them to be lighter. If you make them super dark, it makes them really kind of stand out. Okay, so I'm gonna grab some of my white and just soften this down to a little bit of a gray color, sort of a darker gray. All right, so it's really tough to see that. But in the background, I'm just going to put a few back here that are some indicators of rocks. Okay, we don't want them to actually look like much of anything. All right, and then as we get closer, we can make them look a little bit more distinct. All right, so I'm just going to put some of the dark spots, and then we can come back with some more light areas later on. Okay, so just a couple little here and there in the background. And again, I'm working with a pretty dark gray color here. So we're just mixing a little bit of the straight white into the black. I'm just making this, again, you can't really see very well, but it's a very dark gray. And just little indications. It doesn't even have to be much. Okay, and then when we get up here closer, we can do some bigger pieces. Okay, so maybe there's a little rock there, the edge of the path here, and he's got a little friend behind him. And again, rocks are not perfectly shaped, so we're just going to put in some background shapes, and then the highlights is really what makes the rocks stand out. Okay. So we're going to have, again, not super detailed rocks right here. And up at the top, right on the edge of it here, I want a pretty good size rock. Give me a good amount of paint here. So as they come forward, you want them to have a little bit more darkness to them so that they have a little more detail. Okay, so I want that one to be a little more structured. Put him over there. All right, that rock sits right there, and then we're going to put another little detail on this. I want these a little darker. Just sort of a couple of little things. Okay. So again, we're going to keep working with the dark color and just putting the backgrounds of a few rocks here and there. Okay. Make another little rock there. And they're not usually by themselves, so when you paint these details on, that's when you can start showing that there's multiple in kind of a little clump. So I keep putting my finger into my into my cliff face here. Right. So let me stabilize with my other hand. Okay. Got that little rock going on. And again, you can shape these however you want. Okay. So just a little bit on the path. So this will, again, show some depth, show some variation. You're not sitting here with a exact path that has nothing going on. Okay, so here's another little rock structure over here. We'll put this one up over here. Okay. And these can get bigger and more detailed as you get closer. All right, so maybe right here there's a little rock. Okay, we got a little structure there. And again, I want the bottom of this to be not up to the edge so that it shows some depth, shows some variation. Okay, and I'm just going to put a little bit out over here. Because again, guys, when we come back with the highlights, that's when it really shows the individuals. Okay, so I'm just getting some rock shapes going on. Alright, we're going to mix up a little bit more of our black and brown mixture. A little more black, want it to stay pretty dark. And we're going to come up here and make us a couple of good size rocks. So right here, I want to have one about right here. He's not going to be a perfect rock. He's going to have little things going on. Okay. Need a little more dark to that. It's too brown. Too brown. I want him to be nice and dark. And he'll have a little thing going on there. Something happening down here. Got a little bump there. Okay. So again, the more random you can make these structures, the better. Alright. And then put a little bit right here. There's a good little rock there. And we've got just a couple little ones here. So we want to sort of just break this up a little bit, okay? So we've got some of our little rocks. These are not very dark back here, so I'm going to add a little dark to it. This tends to lighten as it dries, all right? So your colors can kind of play tricks on you a little bit. Sometimes they don't stay as exact as you had painted them. And again, we can put rocks in here to our heart's content. I'm going to throw one down here on the bottom. But I do want to try to not take all day here. But again, this just shows a little bit going on this little shelf down here. Okay, so even though our shelf has been established, we can still add to it. This is our world. I love that. Bob was a big proponent of mastering your world in the little painting that you're in. Because so much of the time in life, we just don't really get control. We don't get the opportunity to decide how things go. So when you're doing your little paintings, guys, just enjoy yourself and realize that you're in control for once. It's a big deal. So we'll put a little bit up here. We can have a couple little rocks here and there, wherever we want. And maybe there's one coming right out of the side of the mountain there. Okay? We don't know. I do want to pull this shelf down just a little bit. I don't like how perfect that edge is. Okay? I like that little break in there. Cool. That's a lot of it, guys, is just seeing things and going back a little bit. Bob always went really fast because he was under a 30-minute timer. Okay, we're not on a timer here. We're just enjoying ourselves doing a little painting. So, yes, this is being recorded, but there's no requirements. Okay, so we don't have anybody telling us when to stop and how fast to go and what our painting should look like. This is us deciding on our own. Okay. All right, so we've got a few little indications of some rocks, and over here I'm going to put some bushes, so I didn't want to put too much there. And we've also got a little area where we can put some some greenery later. Okay, so these are very small rocks. They're kind of far away because we are going to have another area over here that's closer. So I didn't want these to get too big. So I'm going to go ahead and get out most of that dark color out of my brush. We'll just wash it in our... And I just sort of push it against the side and spin the brush to get the paint out of it. Okay, and then I just kind of roll it and get most of the water and any additional paint. Sometimes down here at the base, paint can build up in there. So, but once you can dab it on the paper towel, you know, it's pretty clean. Okay, so now we're going to come in with some highlights. And again, guys, this is the very important part. So in the back, I'm actually going to go with a little bit smaller brush. I'm going to get my little fine tooth brush, fine bristle, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to put some highlights, okay? So again, in the back, we don't want them too bright, but we do want just a little bit to kind of indicate some rocks. Okay, so I'm going to get my white paint here. All right, just a little bit, and I'm just going to touch it in that darker color. So this way it's not a pure white. Okay, and then in the back here we're just going to make some indications of some edges. So wherever that light would hit, that's what you really want to put the stroke on that side. Okay, so I'm just putting a little bit of indicators on some of these. I need a little more paint. A little more paint. And this little tiny bits of paint dries very quickly, guys. Okay, so don't be afraid to reload frequently. Again, I keep putting my hand in. So I'm using my finger on a part that's dry to try and stabilize my hand, and I'm trying to stay above this part that's wet down here. Okay, so I'm just putting little indicators on my rocks that maybe there's some things going on within them. Okay, so we're just giving some little indicators. Come back and get a little more paint. And these highlight colors, guys, always on the side of where the light structure is. So it's kind of here. So these are probably going to be a little more on the right hand side of it versus over here it might be kind of on the top, and then over here it's going to be on the left. Right, so we'll put just some little strokes over here, some little indicators of our little rock faces. I need some more paint. I don't quite have enough. I really want this outside edge to be bright. Okay. There we go. Okay. And you can vary the color as you want. But I'm just going to put a little bit of some color in here. And this white is really what shows the separation of the little individual rocks. Okay, so we've got one here, maybe it comes down here. There's another one right there. He's got his own little buddy. Okay, and then we just vary the color, alright? So these definitely don't want to be too bright. So with that same dirty brush, I'm going to get some of that dark color and come back and touch it. So then in between, it will have a little bit of kind of gray colors going on versus just straight black and straight white. Okay, so we've got our little rocks going on. Things are happening with our little world in here. So hopefully you guys can see these in the camera. It's a little bit far away. But we're going to continue adding in our little streaks of white. Okay, so again, we want to sort of mimic where would that light source be? Maybe on this side now. And this one comes in and there's a little break there, so you can see that's where that rock is. Okay, and these little highlights. This is what separates our pieces. And we'll have one that sort of breaks like this. Maybe it's got a little shelf back here. They're not all going to be just round rocks with one highlight, okay? So that variation is what's going to show some difference and distance and shadow and in and out, okay? So making a little bit more for this one. Make him stand out a little bit more. I keep putting my finger in the paint. That's the fun of it, guys, okay? And again, we're getting a little bit closer, so it's okay for a little bit more detailed in our highlights and that kind of stuff. You want to keep your lines very thin, though, very small, so they're not too distinct yet, because we are going to have more going on. Okay, so I'm just kind of putting a little bit of light. I'm going to throw some dark back in here so it's not quite so perfect. Okay. A little bit of light, a little bit of dark. We can just go back and forth and sort of make different highlight areas. Okay. And again, while this paint is wet, it will start to mix. So you don't want to mess with it too much. Okay. So just putting some little rocks. And again, guys, these are a little bit far away, so they're not going to be super detailed. Just some little indicators. And these are probably not going to be too distinct because they're in the shadows. So I'm going to pull that off, get the paint off my brush, and then sort of blend these a little bit. Okay, so these just little distributions of the paint is, again, it sort of breaks up the line so it doesn't look so flat, right? But it also creates some difference in your rock. So it goes from sort of a light to a dark color, okay? And we'll get more and more detailed as we come forward. So these ones here at the top, these are going to have a little bit more detail to them. Maybe a little edge over here. And that's still wet, so all it did was pull off that black. So I'm going to come back to my white. So again, guys, don't be afraid to reload paint. It definitely takes a good bit to sort of make it happen sometimes and get that on there the way that you want it. Okay, we're going to have another little rock over here. There's one back here. Okay. So again, I'm just putting this on here, getting most of the white off of there, and then just kind of blending it back. Okay, and that black is still in there, so I'm going to have to play with that. Okay. That black is on there pretty good, so we're going to keep adding a little white to it. Alright, so you can start to see some of these little differences in the white to the black. The grays really make everything kind of come together, okay? But you want to have these very distinct light areas, okay? Because that's what is going to show the real highlight of where it's shining almost. And it's amazing to think that rocks shine unless they're like gold or something, but they don't. They just have lighter points where the light hits them. Okay, and so we've got another little pile of rocks over here. I like to make piles of rocks because typically they don't just grow out of the ground on their own. They grow in groups, like Bob said everybody needs a little friend, so even rocks tend to have some friends. Right here. Got a little thing going on. Something in the back. Okay. We don't want this to be too distinct yet. Okay. We really want to keep these just semi-distinct. We want them to be a little bit far away, and that's really what it comes down to, is the closer it is, the more detailed it will look. So we don't want that to be too detailed. Give it a little shade and shadow. All right, so we've got some rocks going on. We've got some pieces there. Let's hit down on our little rocks down here on the bottom and give those a little bit of highlights. Okay, just to kind of show where they are and give them a little bit of a face. Alright, we've got our rocks sort of blended into the ground. So this is just a lot of little detail work, guys. So I know we're taking a long time today, but this is a big piece of our picture, is this rock structure going on here. So, all right, so we're gonna just take our little bit of time and add some of these little details in here and really make it look like we care about our painting. We really do want people to enjoy these. And you guys can do this stuff too. You're seeing how I'm doing it. It's just little details here and there. Okay, it's that little change of color in dark to light that allows it to look like depth of things actually happening. Okay, so some of these are still a little bit wet. This one didn't get too much on. All right, guys. So we've got some good pieces coming along here. Now, some of this again is going to be covered up by other stuff later. We still have some greenery that we want to put in on here. We don't want this to be just pure rock face and real boring. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit more of these white highlights, just a couple sparkles, just to really make them stand out. Because again, this, as it dries, it kind of lightens up a little bit. It doesn't show as distinctly. Okay, so I'm just filling in a couple of these little canvas marks. Okay, so we've got a good piece going on over here. Let's hit this side and we're going to get some bigger strokes happening. Okay, so I'm just going to get my brush washed out and we're going to start doing some bigger things and start coming forward with this. Okay, this is still sort of far away in our rock structure over here, but I want to have some cool things happening. Okay, so we're going to get our knife again and we're going to make some big things over here. So we're going to again get our black and our brown. We want to get a good amount of this going on so we've got lots of paint to work with. Okay, and I'm just making a real dark color that I can distribute over here. Okay, now I want this to come above the sky color because this is going to be the closest thing. Okay, cool. So we've got sort of an indication of where some things are. And again, I'm just going to wipe my knife off and come back in with a little bit of some of these lighter colors. Now, this is not my favorite rocks. Again, getting this to break, a thin paint will stick to a thick paint. Okay, so this paint is all pretty thin. So if you want to make it any thinner, the only other way I know to do this is to add water. All right, so that's a little bit tough to do with the knife itself. So what I'm going to do is actually use my fan brush and dip in here, get a little bit of water, and I'm going to come over here in my white and just get the white a little bit thinner. Okay. So the water from the brush will automatically just mix into the paint. Okay. So I'm gonna just dab that off for now. And maybe this is dry. I'll wait till that's dry. And then we can put a little splash right over that edge, and that will push that back, and then this can be a more foreground piece. Okay, so I'm going to grab some brown and put it into that thin white. Okay, put it right into that thin white. And so now we've got a bit of a thinner color. So when we come up here again, if we want this to look like a little bit of a shelf, we want to leave a little bit on top before we break this off. Okay, so just a real light touch. And you see how the paint breaks. Okay, it'll pull off what it wants. That's what Bob would tell us. I loved Bob Ross. It's sad that guy's gone. Okay, and so the firmer you push, the more evenly it will distribute that paint. Okay, so you really want to make sure you got a light touch. Okay, and I'm going to come back with just a little bit of a darker color, muddle this up a little bit. Okay, and we can also strip right down here. Okay, and these lights and darks, guys, again, these are our difference makers when it comes to the contrast and the shadows and the highlights and where the edges of things are. Okay, so you can play with this back and forth and put however much you want on here. And I'm just using downward strokes again to indicate that gravity is playing its part. And if we got too much in here, you know, you can scrape a little bit off and make it look as though there's some holes and some things happening in your little world. Okay, and again, just a flat, light touch. Okay, so you can start to see our little shape forming out over here. We'll mix up some more color. Very muddled. We don't want it to be even, flat. Okay, maybe I want another little shelf right here. Go with the lay of the land down here. Okay. Real light touch, guys. That's the trick. And it really depends on how much paint you've got on your knife. So again, I'm just kind of going back and forth between the light and the dark and giving it some variations. Okay, so this is a very thick strip of the lighter color. I've got some darker on here, so let's go ahead and see if we can distribute that out a little bit. Oh, there's a little bit of white in there. Okay, and I am going to come back with some of that white again at the very end here. Okay, so every time we have one of these shelves, it allows it to look as though it has depth to it. got going on here. Just spread my color out a little bit sometimes. Put a little bit of streaks in it and make it look a little bit less perfect. Okay, so we've got some good little rock structures here. Now I just want to come and highlight a couple of these pieces, because again, where these, you know, shelves are, the edges, like this one looks very round. Okay, so if we take a little bit of a highlight color and we just edge it out, and it's a very sharp looking edge, that will make it look as though it's dropping off a cliff. Okay, so that really sharp edge, and again, I don't want it to be too exactly perfect. Okay, so we'll break it up just a tad, but also that highlight color. Okay, that's another piece that allows it to look like some things are really happening there. Okay, so we're just going to come up along some edges here and pull some of this lighter color onto them. Okay, I'll just put a little bit of indication of some things going on. Okay, give it a little bit of highlight here. Okay, just a little. And again, the bottom doesn't have to be flat, just the top. And again, don't worry about reloading paint lots. That's part of the game. Okay, and you can even draw with this if you need to. Okay, but those sharp contrasts, that's where we're really going to see the most highlighted points of this. Okay, so I don't want this to really look snowy, but these sharp whites, they really give it that feel of brightness. Okay. Give it some highlights. Some things going on in our little rock world. Okay. A little bit more. And again, less is more sometimes, guys. If you got highlights everywhere, nothing's really highlighted. Okay. So we got some rocks going on, cliffs falling off. And down here, sort of flowing in down into the bottom. Okay, maybe this one's a little bit of a crooked little shelf. Okay, so indicates something else going on. So we're getting some good little depth going on, guys. Again, just that back and forth, that light to dark, that really is what shows those dimensions. Okay, and our black up here, we'll just scrape it a little bit so it's not quite so boring. Scrape it with some of this brownish color. Too much of the white on there. I want some brown in it. And this lateral motion, okay, will indicate a different direction of the land. Okay. Too much on there. Don't like that color. Okay, so this little upward stroke will make it look as though the land is going off in a different direction. Okay, but even some of these edges where they're extra dark, that's where we really get that stark contrast. Okay, so don't lose that. Down here we've got a little bit of a rock thing going on, so I just want to put some highlights on it. And there's a little more than I wanted, so come back with a little bit of my darker color. Again, guys, you can't really mess these up. I love rocks because you can just sort of play with them until they look how you think they should. Okay, so if it doesn't go right the first time, you can just Try it again. And okay, so you can see you can just play back and forth and throw some lights and darks in there and just mix it up a little bit. Okay, but you don't always have to have everything be exactly realistic. We want this to have a little bit of impressionist to it, where the eye creates the rest of the painting. Okay, so we've got our little land piece going on. I do want to throw some rocks down in here before we finish off in this area. So I'm going to come back to my filbert brush. Now we're going to have more of a stark black color. Okay, and we're gonna put paint on one side of the brush in black, and then the other side we're gonna put white. So we're gonna try out a little technique where you basically double load the brush, so there's light and dark on it. Now again, we want the light side to be where the sun would show. So we can see over here it's kind of on the left-hand side. So I just want to make some rocks, but I want to do them in one stroke. So where the difference is, I want to split that. Okay, so I want to hold the brush where this is the edge that touches, where it's the split between the light and the dark. And I just want to put a little indication of a rock right here. I didn't turn it enough. Okay. Alright, and so we've got sort of our light and our dark all in one shot. Okay, and if you don't like it, play with it. That didn't work as well as I wanted it to. That dark really stood out a lot. Okay, so I'm gonna just get a little more of that black on the back side. Really want that to be a very specific edge. Okay. And these differences, again, light to dark, guys, that's what really shows our depths. So we want to break this up a little bit. We don't want it to be a perfect white little thing. Okay. I'm going to put a little more black on the back side of this just to make this a little more of a shadow. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a grayish rock kind of thing going on. I want that to be the back side of that rock there. And we can just put a little bit of dots of some dark into the light and a little bit of light into the dark. Okay, so the more you play with this, the more detail it will have. And these little light touches, guys, sometimes you don't want it to be too distinct. You don't want it to mix. Sorry. You want it to be distinct. Okay, so see how that little bit of white right there, it's going to show that top edge. Okay, and I want this to be nice and bright. The rocks are coming along here, really getting that distinction. Okay, so again, that parts where the light comes to the dark and we've got the shadow on this side of the rock, that's really going to show where things are. Okay, so got a little white on my brush, so let's just bring that down a little. Oh, it looks good. Okay, so we've got a little rock there. We'll just keep the easy way with putting the dark on first, and then we'll come back with the light thing. I was trying Bob's little thing. It works a lot better for trees when you're trying to just do one stroke. The back and forth like this always doesn't work. You got to have a pretty fat filbert brush and some thick paint to really make it happen. So, all right, so we're just going to keep playing with our black here. Put a few rock structures down in the way. Okay, so we'll have one here, And again, these don't have to be perfectly round, but I do like to put a couple of rocks together. It makes them look like they're sort of hanging out. And then I'm going to put another one down here, but I don't want it to come over the top of this. I want some space between the rock so that it looks like its own individual piece closer to you. Okay, so we're going to have a sort of big rock structure going on over here. And our brown underneath is pretty well dry, so we don't have to worry too much about that mixing in. But we do want to keep this very dark. And if you keep this flat on the bottom of your rocks, it'll look like they're sitting on top of the ground. Okay, so we've got some good rock structure going on here. And then I am going to put one more big one down here on the corner. So let's slide this down. Just for something that's going to come all the way to the edge and be as close as possible. So I'm just using straight black right here. And again, I want this little separation of the bottom of our piece there. And I'm mixing in with my colors here a little bit, so that's okay. Alright, so we are working on some rocks today. So we're almost finished here, guys. I appreciate you hanging out with me today. This turned into quite a long video for us, and that's okay. We're here for some fun together, so if you guys got to pause this and come back later, that's all right. Okay, so we've got our rock all the way over here to the edge. So I've got this one pretty wet, so now that these ones are kind of dry, I'm going to come back into my white. And again, when we did the ones in the back, we used a little tiny brush. This one, we're getting up a little bit closer, so we've got bigger surface, so we can handle this brush a little bit better. So anytime we want the rock to look in front, that's the one that's going to have the white edge that comes all the way through. Whichever one is in the back is going to have the dark edge that breaks it. Okay, so again, I want this one to be in the front. Okay, so I'm going to paint it down and then just kind of bring it back in a little bit. Get me a little more white here. I'm going to paint this down and bring it back in. Okay, so if I've got too much paint on there, I can come back in and just sort of muddle this a little, get a little bit of dark, come back in here, put some difference makers in it. Okay. Get all that wiped off. Get a little more white highlight. Okay. So this be very distinct. And again, we've got this over the top where our path is, but I'm showing you rocks in this video, so we're working on the rock stuff. Okay. Another little edge back there. I want these to be fairly flat little rocks going on. So just back and forth between the light and the dark. That's really what I've found is the best way to make these rocks sort of stand out and look real and deep and cluttered and holy, and they always sort of have their own little personalities. Rocks are fun. I've always appreciated little rocks. I remember when I was younger, I used to go out and collect rocks. I love how they really change the structure of landscape. I love doing landscape in my backyard, and in the front yard too, but I really enjoy. Oh, there we go. That's a white. I really enjoy the structure of what rocks bring. You know, that natural element to it. It's amazing to me. So, okay, so we're gonna pull off some of that because it is very, very white. Okay, so just that little bit of light and dark color here. Let's come over to our little bit bigger one here. All right. I'm actually going to switch brushes and use this one that has a little bit more of a fine tip. This one has little hairs kind of brushing everywhere. All right, so I'm going to come back into my white here. Almost pure white. Okay, and we're just indicating where these little edges might be. Okay, and it doesn't need to be perfect. And there's another little guy over here. He's sort of doing his thing. Okay. And so just wherever that left side edge would show in the sun, that's what we're talking about right here. That's what we're doing. Okay, a little more paint. Got ourselves a nice little rock going on over here. Maybe one right there. There's another little edge of one right here. Okay. This one very distinct. Okay. Alright, so we've got some things happening here. Another little edge of one going on right there. Okay, so again, we're just putting on some color, and then we're going to sort of distribute it a little bit and just kind of blend it out. The sharper the line, the more exact edge it's going to look like. So the more you can sort of feather this out. I'm going to use a different brush. So this is just another sort of dry brush. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of pull just a tad bit of that paint to soften that edge where it comes up. Okay, so then it doesn't just look like a hard line of a side of a building. So there's a lot of different ways you can do rocks. Okay, so we're gonna put a little more variation to it. Oh, took that edge right off. So when you don't have any paint on your brush, and you go to put these edges on, a lot of times it'll just pull the paint right off. So you got to make sure that you've got a little paint on there, and there we go. So I'm really just kind of putting these in and making these rocks stand out here. There we go. Okay, so we'll give it a little bit of play to the rocks. They don't have to be perfect round circles. Okay, but leave the back sides of them sort of dark. Okay, it's important to have that shadow color coming out. That's what shows those variations, shadows. Let's put a little bit right there. There we go. Looks like a rock there. Okay, so we've got our little pieces. We've got our little highlights. Okay, and I really want this to have a little more on the top. There we go. And as that paint underneath dries, sometimes you can come back and put on another layer a little more effectively of the highlight color. So depending on how wet the paint is underneath, it may take a couple of times. It doesn't always happen the first time you stroke the paint. That's what I've learned, is especially with acrylic, you really kind of have to put on multiple layers sometimes to get them to not blend. They're really good at blending because this paint is so thin. Okay. So the thinner your paint is, the harder it's going to be to get it to just go over the top of a wet paint that's underneath. So it really may take, you know, a few layers. So as you can see, like I'm doing now, I'm just kind of going back and re-highlighting a couple of these little pieces. Okay. And so we've got a little bit of our rock structure going on in here. We can just throw a few little pieces in there where there might be a little break in the rocks and whatever. Okay. Don't kill all your light. Or your dark. I'm very good at doing that, of over painting. Okay. So if you ever need to, just grab some of that dark and you can come put it back in here and there and make it look like it's got a little bit of dimension to the rocks. They're not just flat little things, same color everywhere. Okay. So we're starting to get closer and closer. We've got this one that's still pretty wet, so I'm almost a little nervous to jump into it, to be honest, because I know it's really going to just mix the color. It's hard to keep them separate, and that's kind of what I'm looking for, is a separation of the colors where it has that light and dark. And if you try to paint on the wet too much, it can mix really easy. So what I'm going to do is pull with my knife and just take off some of this paint. Okay, so I'm going to leave that edge and make sure that it's very distinct there so we can see. But I just took off a good bit of that paint so we don't have to wait as long for it to dry, because I already had the dark color underneath. Okay. So I don't like my rock here. I want to give it a little more of a distinct edge. Okay. These real sharp white edges really define it. Okay. So this is where we're going to make some super detailed stuff. These real hard lines. Okay, they're real brights. I love it. Okay, so let's get some white in here. Let's go get a little dangerous. We're going to start right here at the top where that light would hit the most. Okay. And I don't want everything to be super white, straight edge sort of thing. Okay. So I'm just going to put a little here. And that little brush is what shows the streaks. Okay. So that's okay. I'm just distributing a little bit of color as we go here. Okay, so I'm going to give that a little bit down. Then put it in here. Okay, and the more I dab, the more I'm going to pick up that color underneath. Alright, so if you need to come back to your board and wipe off that dark to get, back to the light again, sometimes that's what it takes. A little bit of that out, so kind of distribute some of those corners. Okay, maybe there's a big one right here. That's gonna come down and come forward. And we got one over here that's sort of doing its thing. Okay, so these little breaks in it. These are where you show the depth, right? And again, it's probably not going to be perfect the first time you touch the paint. You may have to go back over it several times. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. This has been quite an adventure on all the different areas of rocks that we're working with here. So I'm just putting in a couple little difference makers here. Give us some layers. All right. We've got our little rocks going on all over the place. Okay, now I'm going to come in here and just sort of soften the bottoms here. Can pick up some of that weight and distribute it a little bit. And this tapping will actually blend it. So if you've got those brush strokes that you didn't want, you can tap, but if you pull, it will actually create more brush strokes, okay? So totally up to you how detailed you want this. I'm just sort of softening this backside edge of these where they're coming in. And then we'll come back in here and put some more lights and darks, okay? So again, guys, I appreciate you hanging out with me. This has been quite a fun series here. We've got maybe some things dropping off here, and who knows. But this painting has been step by step, every piece coming together as we move forward. So this has been a real good way to learn how to do some individual difference pieces that you can combine however you decide in the future. Okay, whatever method you decide to put them together in, whatever organization, I guess method isn't quite the thing, but being able to see how things are made and then decide how you want to organize them. Okay, so I'm going to leave some of these little pieces in here and just adding some lights and some darks in here. Got a little bit of paint left, so I'm going to continue working on these guys. We're going to wrap up this video and let you get on to some of your own painting. But again, if you're following along with me, appreciate you. And if you are painting, I'd love to see your painting. I'd love to see what you're putting together with these techniques that we've been working on. So if you can shoot me a comment and show me your pictures, I would love that. So thank you guys for hanging out with me. We're going to continue to work on the details of our little rocks, and we've got ourselves a nice flat area, and we're going to come back and add some little bushes and some detail pieces in here and really just finish out our scene with our path that leads us to the water. So appreciate you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.